we will start here shortly, folks. I can't see. Let's see. All right, let's go ahead and start with the roll call and the pledge.
Mayor Bagley.
Here.
Council members Christensen. Here. Finley. Here. Martin. Here. Peck. Rodriguez. Here. And Waters. Here. Mayor, you have a quorum.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, let's go ahead and move on to any motions to direct the city manager to add agenda items. Councilmember Finley?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I don't have my notes up with me, but I had a conversation with some residents about accessory dwelling units, and when, I would like to direct staff that when there is an opportunity to bring that back, that we relook at some of the requirements for accessory dwelling units.
Did I say that again? One more time, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Help me out here.
I would like to direct staff to bring back our accessory dwelling unit ordinance so that we can look at some of the requirements again and perhaps revise them. Such as public notice, so the neighbors around them know what's going on, and the size of the dwelling unit.
Okay, that was seconded by Councilmember Peck. Yeah. All right, let's vote. Actually, let's just put it on. I'm going to vote yes, so let's put it on. All right, do you still want us to vote?
Yes, yes.
I mean, it's already on the agenda, but let's vote anyway. Not really. Not if I can add it to the agenda, so let's just go ahead and add it. All right. So what other motions? Dr. Waters?
Thanks, Mayor Bagley. Maybe you could just add this one too.
Sure.
As an observer before coming on council, I had a chance to watch the council kind of work through some of the challenges of creating an ordinance relative to recreational vehicles parked in a variety of places. That is still an issue. We continue to hear from residents. I think we've heard from our own public safety department how difficult and maybe feckless the ordinance is, even if it is enforced. And maybe there aren't better solutions, but it seems to me that's a problem that needs our attention and is one that could be addressed relatively directly. And I'm not certain of the right timing. I would leave that to you, the city manager.
Let's put that on too, including, other options for the solution to RVs, including the proposal that we heard from Deputy Chief Satter, which was just prohibit RVs in Longmont unless they're in front of your home and you're loading or unloading. I mean, I'm not saying that we're going to do that, but go ahead and bring back what you think, because I know it's still a problem. Councilmember Peck?
I think this is a great idea, and I would second that, but what I would prefer is that we have a Friday morning meeting first to talk about this, because it's a huge conversation, and like you said, we're not gonna get out of here just making a motion on this. We're gonna wanna talk about it and come up with ideas, and so can we, before we put it on the agenda, schedule a Friday morning meeting about the ordinance and have Jeff Satter there and actually talk about what it is we would like to bring back
I mean,
to the agenda
if
to
you get, if four
discuss.
people want to meet, we can all, if four people want to meet, we can meet. I just think in a study session, having Deputy Chief come and talk to us, or
We-
a Friday morning, or whatever city staff wants to do, don't really care.
So I think there were a number of options that we presented the first time we brought this, and I think we can bring those options. Generally, it's increase the distance, prohibit it, and then a version of somewhere in between that. You can look at fines. I think and that may impact something else. I think the challenge with some of these is just the reality of they don't go to court, and so but we can bring that back as an option as well.
And options, but also, given that there's experts on staff,
Right.
suggestions.
And we have those from the work
Okay.
that we've done in the SWAPS group.
Alright.
So I can put that on a study session, or I can put that on a Friday
Whatever you
meeting. That's
think's
up
be-
to you all.
Put it on the study session for now, and if you think we need a Friday morning, let's do
Okay.
it.
All right.
Okay. Yeah. I think it was to, go ahead, Councilmember Waters.
Well, I never got to make a motion. I was stating a concern that if the mayor and city manager would seize the opportunity to put this on an agenda, I don't feel the need to make a motion unless the
I said
mayor
no.
said,
I said
without a
no,
motion, I'm
yeah,
not gonna do it.
yeah.
Then I would say, then I'm gonna make a motion and count to four. If we're gonna get this on an agenda, I just think we owe it to
Agreed.
everybody involved in this to elevate the conversation and to have a more enforceable ordinance that's reasonable, but it can't go on the way it is right now.
So that's on the agenda, and maybe a Friday morning, depending on what our public safety and the city manager thinks we can digest. Okay? All right. Mayor Pro Tem?
Okay, I have a number of things. And I thank Councilman Waters for bringing that, but I think it's a good idea. I also would like, at that discussion, to discuss the idea of safe lots with Joseph from Hope, because that is another option, and I think it's a good suggestion that deserves discussion.
So that actually, council gave us direction to put the information sheets together regarding the different components and sort of a matrix component, how we look at that and possible solutions, of which that was one. Ellie Berto's working on that as we speak, and so when that's ready, we will bring that to council, but that's something that was
Yes,
discussed
but-
at the last meeting.
Yes, but because he actually has participated in this and has a considerable amount of expertise, I would like to hear from him regarding this at that Friday meeting.
I'd prefer not to do it at the same time, just because the RV and the safe lots, I mean,
It is about the RVs, partly.
all right, well, Harold, can you do that? Meaning,
Let me look at it and see how, yes, if that's council, that may then.
my
put-
point is
yeah.
that, in your mind, there are two issues. And
Correct.
how closely they're related, you know, if they're related, let's do it. If they're not related, let's don't. But, you know, I mean, again, I assume they weren't that related, but yeah, Mayor Pro Tem could be right. Yeah, it could be related.
Yeah, let me work with staff on that. That may then lend itself to a Friday meeting, because
Okay.
that then becomes a larger
There you
conversation.
go.
Yeah.
All right,
uh-huh,
good
a
enough?
longer one, yeah.
All right, cool.
think that's
And then
fair.
Councilmember Martin?
Okay,
Oh, sorry,
also
Mayor
have-
Pro Tem, you still have the floor.
yes, I still have the floor, because that wasn't even what I was going to bring up. I would also like a Friday session dedicated specifically to continuing our discussion about affordable housing. I asked for this at the last one that we had, and although this is part of our, one of our council work plans, there was no enthusiasm for that. I would like to distribute this. I'm going to be distributing this through Dawn Quintana. This booklet that I ordered for everybody from National League of Cities, and some other things from, some other information from HUD, because the things that I would like us to discuss are, I mean, this is listed as a leading problem in our city, in our county, and in our country. It is on our work plan for council. I've led on this, and I'm prepared to continue to lead, and so I will be sending out this whether you want to meet or not, and just so that we're informed about it. I think the issues we need to discuss are current demographics and data, ownership versus renting, preserving the housing that we already have, the missing middle, which is not the 80 to 120%. It is a kind of housing, a kind of variety of housing that we are lacking, and that would be that really fits in very well to Longmont, that is pictured in here and explained in here. Those are solutions that have worked for 150 years. And different financial models, such as cooperative housing and things like that, and just different physical models. So that's one thing I would like to ask we do, is have a Friday session for affordable housing. Would you consider putting that on the agenda
Here's
for Fridays?
Here is my concern, right? I am all for you doing that, or us doing that. My only concern is that when this council gets together and we discuss, all we do is talk. It becomes a political ideology discussion. Whereas what I would prefer is, if somebody has an idea on how to solve some of these,
That's exactly what this is for.
I mean, what I would prefer is, say, I would like to put this motion on a future agenda. Meaning, if there are some solutions, I mean, like, for example, if you just said that, like, these solutions have worked for the last 150 years,
Yes.
I would like to see, a white paper from you or staff or somebody saying, this is what I think we should be doing as a city. And then we make, and then,
HUD has also published many, many things on these very things. That's what we need to talk about.
yeah, so I guess again, as long as I don't want to talk, I want to hear me personally, I want to hear if staff or experts want to talk to us. What I don't want to do is I'm guilty of it as well. We get people here and then we talk and we have a captive audience. And I want to hear solutions, but I don't think we're going to be able to come up with any in a discussion. I just want to learn and then hear a motion. Even you can make a motion and we just go forward with it.
Okay, but this is for Friday, not for an agenda thing here.
No, I know.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that, so what would we do on Friday?
We would get some people who do know more about us than this area, and we would discuss current demographics and data, because I hear the same kinds of discussions coming from us that are not based on the reality of the current demographics and data that we have from the state demographers, from local statistics, from various things. We would discuss ownership versus renting. We would discuss solutions listed in here and in various HUD publications and various CHOPA publications that give us some more expertise in this, and talk to people like that. We would discuss different financial models listed in here and different physical models listed in here, and other HUD and Urban Institute and various other organizations.
I think that would be a fantastic idea. Is it okay if we wait till after the city staff gets together all that information that we asked them to? Remember how when we had our discussion at the firehouse, we came together and said, you guys are going to put together a white paper on demographics, on different segments of homelessness.
Talking about homelessness. This isn't homelessness. This is about affordable housing.
I would argue that homelessness and affordable housing are closer
Yes.
linked than a safe lot than an RV.
Well, they're all kind of they're all linked.
So I guess I would like to see, my understanding is there a crossover?
So in terms of affordable housing, I mean, I think tonight's conversation is getting at some of these points. I think when we look at what we're doing, and I don't know what's in that book, but at least what we found in terms of our research and where we've come from as an organization and the options we have, I think we're considered it as one of the communities that's probably doing the most in terms of this, and I think we could have this conversation once we get up and finish those other two items. So I'm not sure.
What other two items?
The housing items that we carried over,
Mm-hmm.
because one of those is about how we approach. The question
So-
from council was how we approach incentives and what else can we look for, and this is that recapture of here's this world beyond it.
So-
In terms of cooperative housing, we do have some of those being built in the community. One is on 66 and Alpine that you all talked about, and so I would need to read that to
So-
really see what's in there.
So I wouldn't have a problem. Let's put it on the agenda with the understanding that given the,
Friday.
giving the workload, city staff will put it into
Queue.
the queue and bring it at an appropriate time when you're ready to share the data and have that discussion, given all the other priorities that you're currently juggling. Fair enough? Okay.
At a Friday session.
At a Friday session,
Yeah.
sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Councilmember Martin?
One other thing.
Nope, sorry, Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay. When we passed special and metro districts, we did not develop any criteria for review. And it's come to my attention that that staff is currently reviewing that without us giving them any criteria. And I would like us to put on an agenda here that we discuss the criteria for evaluating special district. The first special district has already given a letter of intent, and as I said, they're being reviewed currently without any criteria. I would like that to be paused until we can develop some criteria. That doesn't make much sense to be developing or to be reviewing something without any review criteria. At the time we talked about the special metro districts, we had a very good example from Fort Collins, and I would like us to review that again and have a discussion to put this on, have a discussion on a public city council meeting.
Councilmember Martin, do you have a comment on this issue? You're still in the queue for your issue. All right, so can we,
Well, can we
the queue pop?
vote to put that on?
Sure, but I mean,
All right.
if you make a motion, it needs to be seconded.
I am making a motion that we put that on a future agenda. Do I have a second?
Well, you can second it or not. I don't believe that there is such a thing as a conditional second, but yes. All right, go ahead, Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. Okay. First of all, I believe that that Eliberto's work is essential input to the discussion on affordable housing as well as homelessness, because it's certain that some segments of the homeless or the housing precarious, I think, are connected to the kind of affordable housing that we have in the city, and specifically in the motion of some demographics up and down the housing ladder. So I think it's hard to discuss what kind of affordable housing supply we want to have without having the data about what our demographics of the precariat really are. So I would like to say that that discussion should be scheduled after Eliberto completes his work. Well, Councilmember Christensen, what was the second point that metro districts? Criteria. I also have learned that Fort Collins Fort Collins uses a template for metro districts, and some of the sustainability items that I proposed we consider at the last Friday session on sustainability that I had asked for, and then we sort of didn't continue with that subject. They have put some of those sustainability criteria in their metro district template, and I think that that was a very good idea, and that we should do that too. So I agree that we need to have not only just criteria, but a template, so that, I mean, I know we've got one in the queue already, and since we didn't act fast enough, I think we should still continue to review that one. But we need to have a template for future metro district contracts, so that they all look alike and we can evaluate them in a consistent way. I don't think we should have a moratorium on evaluations until we get our template, but I think we should proceed with all deliberate speed to create a template so that we don't have too much variety in what we do.
Dr. Waters?
Let me just clarify, do we have a motion on the floor? It was a,
Believe we do. I think Councilmember, or Mayor Pro Tem made a motion to suspend or put a moratorium on metro districts or not approve any until we've had the chance to establish a criteria for said metro districts. There was a half of a motion by Councilmember Martin, and then a full motion, or I'm sorry, half of a second by Councilmember Martin, followed by a full second by Councilmember Peck.
so,
No? What did you say? Sorry.
I suggested that we do that, but my motion was simply to put on a future agenda a discussion of creating the criteria for special and metro districts so that we can evaluate them properly and have some consistency for people who want to do these.
That is the,
Fort Collins
that's the
does,
motion.
and other towns, yes.
Too late. It's already been seconded by Councilmember Peck. But thank you for your full second. There's nobody in the queue. Dr. Waters?
do I have the floor back?
You have the floor.
Well, I think the idea of clarity on criteria for review is a good idea. So let me just say that. But I do want to clarify, because there was a premise underlying, at least, are you reviewing? Because I know we had a letter of intent in late May, I think. Are you currently reviewing a metro district proposal?
Yes, council directed us to review one, and so we're in the process of that. I have been made aware of the fact that I think 3 more are coming in that we need to bring to you to get direction on whether or not to review those.
Well, I saw we had a letter of intent. I don't ever recall having an agenda item in front of us to give direction on a specific metro district.
You did. It was on the Meadowbrook, or what's it called? Mountain Brook Metro District, and that was the one where all you're doing is
what did I
directing us
miss?
to review it.
Well, so where I was going with my question is, I honestly, I'd have to go back and look at our minutes that we gave direction. We took a vote.
Yes.
Okay. Well, it was one of those 11 o'clock at night deals, I guess.
I tell you guys.
Where I wanted to go with my question is, do you don't review those criteria free? I mean, you're bringing some criteria to the review of an application like that or a proposal.
Yeah, Eugene has what's in the ordinance right now in terms of how we're reviewing it. I can't find it, so I'll have to let him read.
Well, I wasn't going to push you on that. I guess
Right.
I heard the statement made, and I don't want to argue about it, but I just want to maybe balance this up. The staff is not going to review these things without any criteria. Now, we haven't directed a criteria, but you don't bring a blank slate to those. I assume you're bringing our objectives for affordable housing. You're bringing questions about or concerns about governance and the transfer of governance. You're bringing questions about financing and how it gets financed and how debt service gets accomplished, I would assume.
Correct.
All right.
And in that, we have obviously Jim Golden, our finance director, Jim Manier, who you've seen. He's working in that process. Carolyn White is working in that process. And then any number of staff looking at this, and Eugene can give you the section.
So I don't favor suspending the review process.
That's
We have
not-
competent staff reviewing,
I was
but I
corrected.
do believe that putting us in that conversation is a good idea.
Councilmember Finley?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. So we have 3 or 4 experts in metro districts looking at all our metro districts, and we're going to somehow come up with a criteria that's better than what they would have. I would say every metro district's going to be different. So the criteria for that metro district will be different. And you can make up something that might apply to most of them, but I would leave that to the experts myself, so I won't be voting for this.
I guess my thought is, I do think I would be in support of this, but again, it's about timing. I'm not Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, or Ben Franklin. I don't have a grasp on what works when we're building democracy and local. I don't know exactly how metro districts will work. I mean, I understand in concept, and I could fake a discussion as we debate. I've always kind of viewed it as it's our discretion, and I want to see them. And so I can then start applying what we're being asked for and then go, oh, yeah, that'll work, that won't work. And so I kind of look at each of these metro districts coming forward as an opportunity to say, no, we're not going to allow that kind of stuff. Yeah, we will allow that kind of stuff, and kind of start learning how they work. And so that's how I've always kind of viewed, at least me personally, how I've always viewed the metro district discussion. So I am for the motion so long as we put it after we start seeing some of these metro districts, to at least give myself a point of reference about what we're dealing with. So, yeah, I don't know everything. Councilman Martin?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. At CML, there was discussion on metro districts and specifically on how a municipality can ensure compliance with an implementation plan as opposed to lose control of the implementation plan. And that's been a point of contention in this city. So some of the criteria that aren't about the city vision or the city code or the taxation plan or any of that stuff are things that need to be in the implementation plan, that include reporting requirements and triggers for the city suspending because of non-compliance, and exit terms. And those are general. They should be in every plan. They won't necessarily be the same, but those elements should exist in every plan. And CML, as well as I think the city of Fort Collins, have examples of how that's done. And that, so it's not like we are, it's not like we're inventing this out of whole cloth. There are examples. There's not enough in the state code to be sure that all those things are there, but shame on us if we don't ensure that all those things are there.
All right, there's nobody left. Would you be opposed if we put it on the agenda after we hear from the first metro district and maybe have a discussion? So we'd hear a metro district, and then before we make a decision, we have a discussion on what metro district should look like? See what I'm saying? Criteria for metro districts is, yes. You see what I'm saying? Or would you rather have it before they even come? All right, so the microphone wasn't on, but Mayor Pro Tem said that she'd rather have it before, otherwise it's a little late. So let's go ahead and vote. Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Waters. This is a motion to put a discussion on what the criteria for metro district should be with the city. We want to have that discussion. It's not suspending further review, nor is it specifically saying when we put it on the agenda. It's just, the motion is, let's talk metro districts and criteria. Harold?
Okay, I get that part.
What don't you get, Harold?
When? I
Well, we
mean,
can-
we've got one
let's-
coming within the next 2 or 3 meetings.
Yep, so let's go ahead and vote on this,
Yeah.
and then we can talk about timing. Someone else can make a motion. Right. That passes 6-1 with Councilmember Finley against. All right, I actually move that we have this discussion after we have the first Metro District proposal. Can you clear the queue? All right, let's go ahead and vote. Let's all press our buttons again, because apparently our thumbs are weak. All right, that passes 5-2 with Councilmember Rodriguez and Mayor Pro Tem Christensen against. All right. That should clear the queue for all our motions on, now that we've made sure we have full agendas for the next 8 months. All right. All right, let's move on to public invited to be heard. We have a full agenda tonight. I'm just kidding, there's 4 of you, so make sure it's good, because we're relying on you to keep Channel 8 in business. So, Yuri Deputat. It's tough, but it's okay. I appreciate that. And it's starting to, oops.
Check. My name is Yuri Deputat. I live at 1183 Trout Creek Circle, and thanks for saying my name so well. I was very happy to see it reported in the Sunday Times Call that the city council members voted unanimously to support asking voters to increase sales tax for building the pool and ice center. You've seen me here before talking on behalf of the ice part of the pool and ice, and I want to sincerely say thank you for listening and thank you for taking the balloting action. Additionally, it would be great if our town had more library locations. If it was a separate ballot issue, I would most certainly vote in favor of it. If it was part of the pool and ice proposal, it would not stop me from voting yes on that ballot issue. I'm also in favor of building other things in our city. For example, building a performing arts center or convention center where we could have concerts, host feature performers, and show off our city at business events. However, I don't think all voters are necessarily as progressive thinking as I am on these matters. There are reasons why someone may vote for pool and ice center and might be against libraries, different strokes for different folks. I think lumping the library annex in with the pool and ice project at this late stage would, 1, give a reason to voters to vote against the ballot issue because it would be perceived that we ask for more and more, and 2, it would show an example of a process that allows for the addition of a last-minute earmark, and as a result loses support because we've been less than fully transparent in bringing the issue to the voters. Where one item required a long study and an arduous community feedback process, the other seems like an afterthought that is being stuck on. Either way, I'm very hopeful that the sales tax ballot issue passes and in a few years we get our new pool and ice center. I think adding the library annex to the proposal would reduce the probability of a successful outcome, and I'd recommend the library annex go through its own study and community support feedback process. Less advisable, but still an option, you could add it as a separate balloting issue so our voters can decide about having the additional library location on its own merit. Again, thank you for getting us to this point.
Thank you,
Thanks.
sir. All right, Victor Vela. Victor, oh, there he is.
Hello, my name is Victor Vela, and I was born and raised in Longmont. I was the first president of El Tomote right after the Hispanic shootings of 2 Hispanic kids that were shot and killed. Veteran, Army veteran, served 3 years for our country. I'm here to oppose the bond issue for the aqua swimming and the ice rink. And the reason I feel that it's not gonna help the majority of Longmont, where I think it's only gonna do like maybe 10 or 15% of the community here. And if you're gonna spend 45 to 50 million dollars on two facilities, that's only gonna help 10 to 15% of this town. To me, that money is kind of a waste in a sense. I always, and then that 45, 50 million dollars will probably go up more anyway. But I've coached in this town for 39 years, baseball and football, high school on down, and you know, to me, by having that facility, it's going to leave some of these kids out that can't afford to go to there. Right now, I think that there's going to be a sports facility for students and parents rather than for the whole community. I don't know if you guys took a study on roughly how many kids here or parents play ice hockey in this town? 5%? Same with swimming. I have nothing against swimming, but I think if all that 45, 50 million dollars, we could use that on another rec center. This town is getting big. It's, what, 90-some thousand people, whatever it is, and we still only got one rec center. You're gonna go out there and build a facility that's 45, 50 million dollars, which only gonna attract or be able to use by 15 to 20% of the people. This rec center over here is so overcrowded now, you can't even, it's almost like you have to make a reservations a month ahead. We could, with that money, I believe we could use another rec center or 2 rec centers, put a nice swimming pool, some more lanes in there. But this idea of, and I know this gentleman before me, I understand where he's coming from. I have nothing against ice. I like hockey. I like swimming. I like all sports. But come on, let's tax money.
All right, thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Douglas Bear.
Good evening. My name is Doug Bear, 1024 Kane Drive in Longmont. I've been here 40 years. I'm here to talk about my opinions on the bike dismounting in the crosswalk. Crosswalk is walk for pedestrians. A premise has been made that cyclists are coming from a sidewalk downtown. From my understanding, they're not supposed to be on the sidewalks downtown. It's for pedestrians. It's called a sidewalk. Bicycles are vehicles. They should be licensed, taxed, and plated. And that was on the books 40 years ago about putting a plate on there. That would help with the fact the times that they stray out of their lane, which everybody's paid for the taxes to make that lane, and there's no way to identify them. Now with car cameras and such, you could identify the violators. Right now, it's just a person in a blue coat, black tires on the bike. Someone said that the word dismount was not understood. Well, it's centuries old. That's idiotic. Has the police department been queried about removing this rule? It was made 8 years ago for some reason. I don't remember the reason. Can somebody research that reason? I doubt if that's gone away. It's with more people, more bikes. The reason is probably increased. The cyclist's death on July 24th was reported in the Times Call. In that article, the TC stated the police have responded to 9 to 10 crashes a day this month. I do not believe the city should be dropping any rules that could help prevent people getting hurt in accidents. I'd like to know, council, please ask yourself, Who asked for this rule to be dropped? And I would like someone to inquire with the police, how many incidents happen before the 8 years to make this somebody come to you and have council approve it? Obviously, it was good enough then to say, let's do this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, that concludes our first, just kidding, Mr. Pedro. Gordon Pedro is next.
Mayor and Council. Gordon Pedro, 2639 Falcon Drive. Council members, under item 5C, you are reviewing several issues tonight that deserve your careful consideration before placing them before your voters. The competitive pool and ice rink / library annex is a proposed tax increase in bond authorization. I want to share some concerns regarding this tax increase. First, your council communication states that this tax increase, quote, an increase of 2 cents on each $10 purchase beginning January 1st, 2020, quote. This narrow incremental look at the impact of this tax increase on residents at or below the city median income level distorts reality regarding what is really happening to the buying power of these residents. Before considering the ordinance in this first reading, we all need to see the total impact of the tax increase plus proposed rate increases for essential services such as water, sewer, and electricity. As you are aware from previous polling, a significant number of residents questioned the need for a competitive pool and ice facility. Voters will be far more positive if you provide them the total impact information prior to this item being on the ballot. My second concern regarding the tax increase is the failure to provide a sunset provision for after the bonds are retired. This tax increase is being sold for a specific project, but you are actually requesting a permanent increase. If the St. Vrain Valley School District pays its share of the operating expenses, we do not know at this time that this tax increase needs to be permanent. My third concern is the one the library board has identified. It makes no sense to connect a library annex to this project since you have just authorized staff to hire a consultant to develop a library master plan. Slow down. Let's decide as a community what our library system of the future should be. Then we can start building a planned library system, not an ad hoc mismatch of structures. My final concern under item 5C pertains to the street tax. I have not seen a rationale for making the street tax permanent. No project has been identified that requires bonding at this time. Less than 5 years ago, voters approved extending the 5-year sunset clause to 10 years in order to allow for longer range planning. Now, you already want to completely eliminate the sunset clause. If you want the voters to agree with you, we need to see some compelling information. If really warranted, this can be done in 2020. The sunset clause is the means by which residents guarantee they get transportation results. Once the sunset clause is removed, we give up our power to periodically review performance. Anyone that thinks that's a good idea should look at RTD's responsiveness regarding bus service and fast tracks. And the other thing, there are several other taxes that the council has talked about needing in the future, and I just wonder if the cumulative impact of what you're proposing now, plus a tax for funding the library master plan when it's finally done, and funding a performing arts and convention center, how is this going to impact the lower income folks in our community? Are we going to drive them out of this city? I hope not. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. All right, now that concludes First Call Public Invited to be heard. And if you'd like to speak to us, you can come back next meeting because we're not going to do it at the end of this meeting because it's a study session. But let's go ahead and move on to special reports and presentation, a proclamation designating the week of August 2nd through the 11th, 2019 as the 150th anniversary of the Boulder County Fair Week in Longmont, Colorado. Is there someone here who's going to accept this? All right, then I'm just going to proclaim this week, August 2nd through the 11th, 2019, as the 150th anniversary of the Boulder County Fair Week in Longmont. And I'm not going to read it, but it will be, it's official. So if they're not here, then we'll just move on. All right, let's go ahead and move on to, unless somebody insists that I read it. Okay. All right, let's move on to study session item. We've only been going for about 45 minutes, so we're okay. 5A, discussion on additional development incentives for affordable housing. And this is the continuation of our July 16th study session. Welcome back. Oh, my brain's fresh.
Good evening, Mayor Bagley, members of council. I'm Erin Fosdick with the Planning and Development Services Department. I'm joined again tonight by Tarek Wafai with Clarion Associates. They've been our code consultants for some time and are assisting us with the additional development incentives for affordable housing. We first talked about this on July 16th, and we're just continuing that discussion. So just as a reminder, the purpose is really, per council's direction, to bring back some information to consider additional development incentives that we might consider for affordable housing. We started this discussion a couple weeks ago and did get through a couple of things, so we really are just planning to pick up where we left off. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tarek.
Actually, we actually stopped. Well, we'll get right to you. There's currently a motion on the floor. So the motion that was made by Councilmember Rodriguez, he moved, and it was seconded by Councilmember Finley, that any additional incentives council votes on starts at 25% or more percentage of affordable housing units. So that is currently on the floor. And that we had just started debating it when I begged people, oh my gosh, I'm so tired, let me go home, and you guys were kind. So that is the motion. There's currently nobody in the queue. Do we vote on that, or Dr. Waters?
So we are now in discussion?
Yes, that is where we left off.
So I like the idea of establishing a threshold. The question is, what's the right threshold? And I'm not certain if there was a rationale behind Councilmember Rodriguez's motion. My concern is that we could, I'm all for ambitious goals, but we can set them so high that people choose not to pursue them because they're simply not achievable. So I wonder where the cutoff is. Is 25% the number, or are we more likely to get a bigger response with a 20% or an 18% threshold? That would be my question. And I don't know if there's data on this, if there's a set of examples to say, yeah, here's where they've nailed it, and here's the point beyond which you get diminishing returns. And I don't know if our consultant has an answer to that, but that's my concern.
Yeah. Go ahead. Do you have an answer for that? Come on.
No, I don't.
Okay.
Actually. So I just want to quickly chime in that unfortunately there's somewhat of a chicken and an egg conversation there. Depending on what type of incentive or bonus that you are going to offer, that really drives where you need to set the threshold.
Councilmember Rodriguez, I got a question for you. Why did you say 25%? Could you just kind of maybe describe your thinking?
Well, Mayor Bagley, I think part of the impetus was moving a conversation forward at a late point in a meeting, as well as there was, I believe, some sort of options laid out in the communication where it said, does it start at 24%, the doubling of our current 12% rate? And I just used 25 as a slightly larger percentage and a rounded number, if you will, from that proposed maybe suggestion that was in our communication.
Okay.
So there was no data behind that motion.
Okay. Just instinctive genius. Understood. Councilmember, Mayor Pro Tem?
I believe that I understand what Councilman Waters is saying is that, if you make the standard, if you make the requirements so high, then no one will take us up on that. But the truth is they already have incentives. We're talking about really additional, extraordinary incentives should we choose to do them. I don't think we have chosen whether we're going to do them anyway, but I do think that if they're going to get an additional incentives, Longmont has given many more fee waivers and incentives for developers than anyone else in the county, which is good for us and good for the developers because it does encourage them. But to continue to offer them without some extraordinary effort on their part also, I don't think helps anybody. So I do think 25% is not a bad amount. That's offering much more, double what the requirement is, and I'm in support of that.
Councilmember Martin?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I have to say, I think a higher threshold is a good idea, but I have no idea what that threshold should be. And I found that on the list of what additional incentives should be considered, something important was missing, which is we should have some clear idea of what the value of each incentive might be to the developer, and more importantly, what the cost to the city of giving the incentive should be. And if we knew because one thing that I think it would be clear is that depending on how a developer does business and who he has partnerships with and all kinds of stuff, what their specialties are, some incentives might be more valuable to one developer than to another developer. So we should be mostly focused on the cost side. But what we don't have is an estimate here of what the cost to the city of a particular waiver or code relaxation or, any of the things listed now. I think it needs to be, instead of a list, it needs to be a table with the effective cost to the city of offering the incentive. And if you knew that, then it would be easier to say, well, these incentives can be chosen by developers who are developing at a higher threshold level, and then we could evaluate the trade-off between offering the incentive and at how many units we wanted to try to get by offering that incentive. So what I would like to suggest is that we reconsider this motion or a similar motion after we've discussed the list of incentives and seen a list of costs, rather than voting on it now in kind of an information vacuum.
So I was gonna, Councilmember Rodriguez?
Actually, as I outlined the reasoning behind the motion originally, knowing that it was going to spur this kind of conversation and thought, as well as the circumstances having changed somewhat in the freshness of our brains at the moment, I would propose, I would like to remove my motion at this time.
Again, I just want to point out that I recognize the instinctive genius first of Councilmember Rodriguez. So I was going to actually make a motion to table this discussion until A, we had staff could communicate with experts to bring back a number that they'd suggest backed by data, and 2, until we've had the update on affordable housing financial incentives, which is number 5B. So the motion's been removed. So shall we go ahead and have an update on affordable housing financial incentives at this point, which is I think what you guys are going to be talking about?
I am not here to talk about financial incentives. In fact, just continuing the conversation on development, on-site development incentives for
Okay.
affordable housing.
All right, let's continue with that then.
Okay.
Yeah, Councilmember Peck? I'm sorry, there's
Thank
people in
you.
the queue.
Before we have this, I would like to make a motion.
Sure, go ahead.
So I move that any development which includes a metro district not be able to apply for incentives or fee waivers that the service plan for the district covers. And the reason I'm saying this is that
Could you say that one more time? Sorry, could you repeat the motion?
yeah, I'll be glad to. I move that any development which includes a metro district not be able to apply for incentives or fee waivers that the service plan for the district covers. For example, and the reason for this is that both of these are taxes. So if you have a metro district and it covers something that you want a fee waiver for, you shouldn't be able to have both of those covered by taxes. Does that make sense? For example, infrastructure. If you're going to have a metro district that covers infrastructure, then you shouldn't be able to get an incentive for that as well. Because the incentives come from taxes from our, well, I don't know, whatever comes up in the service plan. That's just an example. I don't know what that would be.
Because most of the incentives I think we're going to be talking about are like density bonuses, height bonuses. Rather than money incentives, it would be letting the developer build more affordable housing, for example. You would prohibit that?
It depends upon what the service plan covers.
Okay. So-
I don't know.
All right, so there's people in the queue. Can you, so I'm going to call on you. If you have something to say, make sure that your comment pertains to this motion and then stay in the queue. Was it seconded?
I'll second it so we can talk about it.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem.
I do think maybe what we should do is bring this up under the financial incentives, because your proposal, because those are the things that are actually, they're actually getting tax money from. These are bonuses and reductions in parking regulations, and so maybe that's what you, I don't know, if you would like to move it to the when we're having the financial discussion, that might be better. But it's up to you, obviously. However, I do I see the sense in what you're saying, in that because someone with a special district or a metro district is getting paid by the people with an extra tax, then they should not also be getting public money waived for the same thing. It's double dipping, kind of. Correct? Okay. So I'm in support of that, but I think a better place to move it would be the financial incentives.
Councilmember Martin. I'm sorry. Councilmember Peck, did you have anything? Okay, sorry. Councilmember Martin.
I also agree in principle that double dipping shouldn't be allowed, but I don't think we need a new motion or rule on it at this point, because I think that should be identified when the council reviews the service plan, and shame on us if we don't catch it at that point. Yeah, I mean, we shouldn't let that happen. We shouldn't award an incentive to a project if paying for the payback for that is in the municipal district. But don't we already have a point to exclude that?
Dr. Waters?
So I'm trying to wrap my head around what you just said, Councilmember Martin, and this motion. An incentive exists when a developer is delivering on what we've said as a mandate. They get incentives implied to 12% or 8% or more than 12% of the inventory they're building in a development, right? It's not. I'm not certain what that has to do with a metro district. I get the concept of double dipping, but I guess I'm wondering, why would we say to a developer, we want you to build X percent, 12% or more of affordable homes, but if your financing scheme to cover all the costs is to amortize that over time, which what a metro district would do, as opposed to charge it all up front, which is what the alternative might be, but that's what we get a chance to examine. Why would we say we don't want you to build the affordable homes, or we're going to withhold the bonus to do exactly what we've asked you to do? That doesn't make any sense to me. And since we get a chance to approve every single metro district proposal that gets approved has to go through this body. We get a chance to review the service plan and the financial plan. We have to approve both. We get a chance to make the question or the concern that Councilmember Martin shared earlier about enforceability is a critical part of that discussion as well. That you don't get a bait and switch in terms of, us approving one thing and going another direction, but that's on us. So I'm confused as to what the connection is between the bonus for delivering what we said we want and how a developer's gonna cover all their costs for delivering that.
Yeah, so let's go ahead. Sorry, Councilmember Finley?
I can't think of an example of the double dipping. Could you give me an example of one of our incentives that would be double dipping?
Well, that's called call the question, but there's nobody else in the queue, so instead of calling the question, which would require a majority vote, let's go ahead and just vote on it, because there's nobody in the queue. Great. All right, cool. Let's vote. All right, that motion fails 4-3 with Council members Finley, Mayor Bagley, Councilmember Martin, and Councilmember Waters voting against. So, all right, let's move on to, 5A. I'm sorry. Oh, sorry, there's plenty of people in the queue. Dr. Waters.
Can we
Sorry.
go back to the motion that Councilmember Rodriguez offered where we started?
Uh-huh.
In the council communications was under questions for council consideration, number 3, as I recall.
Correct.
And he was trying to help us answer that question, which I appreciate. But it seems to me that we still, don't we need to answer that question as we look at other incentives?
Right, but I think that
Or we could turn it around to say, let's agree what's the bundle of incentives or not. For example, on the SES alternative in here, I'm going to strenuously argue against giving people a pass before we even have an instrument or a tool ready. But that said, do we want to go through and see what that bundle is and then decide what the percentage is or the threshold that developers would have to meet to take advantage of whatever we've said we're willing to consider? What's the...
I run the meeting, but it's not my meeting. I personally would like to hear what the proposed development incentives are, along with even the financial incentives. Then we can talk about how, if we put 25%, but the incentives are not that cool, it's a waste of time, right? So go ahead. I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem, you're in the queue.
Okay, because we had a lengthy discussion about this, and yet it was several weeks ago. I would like, what we are supposed to be giving direction on is on page 2, and it is on the enhancements to current incentives, the density bonus, the height bonus, the lot size and width, and the parking reductions. But then also adjustments or reductions to landscape standards, waivers or adjustments to site building and building design standards, flexibility with the sustainability, SES, expansion of allowed housing types, and the threshold to additional incentives. Those are the things that we need to be deciding. Did we already decide these? It seems to me we did. No? I would like to add something to before, when we were discussing landscape standards, I asked Paula Fitzgerald, who set up our current landscaping standards, and I don't know if she replied to everybody here. She did, okay. So that clarified something to me that I did not really understand. I'm pretty good with plants, but I'm not red hot with trees and stuff like that. So her explanation of why we should not relent much on tree diameter, while this may seem very, very obscure, but it really does not make that much of a financial difference to the developer. It does make some. However, the survival rate for the trees is considerably lessened because of damage caused by both weather, by passers-by, by children and pets. It's much greater if you have a larger diameter tree. So I would take back what I said about being willing to reduce landscaping standards by much, because I do think that those were very, very well thought out previously, and because it is a minor part of the developer's cost, I would not like to see that reduced. In fact, I really don't want to see any of these current incentives enhanced, because we already have, these are already very good package of incentives And in addition, we have a very, very extensive list of fee waivers and fee waivers and fee reductions. So the developers are getting a pretty good, we're helping them out a great deal. And this is all taxpayer money that we're either not getting or we're reducing it. So I don't really want to reduce this anymore. I would vote against any of these additional enhancements myself.
All right, so I guess a quick question before we go on with the rest of the queue. There are people in the queue. So my question is, the enhancements that we currently have on the books, do they get those just by, even if they comply with the 12%, they automatically get the enhancements, correct?
That was the direction in the.
Correct. So the real question becomes, so really what we've done currently as it stands is if someone, go ahead, Tariq.
I'd like to chime in quickly. So to be very clear on a couple of points. First of all, the financial package, any of those waivers, fee waivers, not part of this agenda item. However, to answer the mayor's current question, it is not automatic that those incentives would apply. You are eligible for those development incentives if you're providing the required 12%. However, there are lots of different ways to comply with that 12% requirement. These are available to those providing affordable housing on site.
So I think
Correct.
that's a key definition point, because if, and I've heard this in the conversation, if you're not building affordable homes, you don't get these incentives. You have to be building the product to get these incentives, and it does, and Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, it applies to the affordable units. It doesn't necessarily apply to the market rate. Is that correct? Or is that the financial?
That would primarily be the financial incentives, although the parking reduction would only apply to the affordable units.
Correct.
And I'm not going to make a motion at this time, but again, going back to my earlier comment of I don't know everything and I hear things and things go, I didn't know that before. For example, I don't think we should have a parking incentive. Every time we're going to build an affordable housing complex, the neighbors show up, and one of the primary concerns are, you're not building enough parking, and you're just going to take our on-street parking, and so our neighborhoods are now getting rid of our parking in order to comply with your affordable housing dreams. And I don't think that's cool. And I also think with the climate situation, I think cutting back on landscaping and trees and green stuff is a bad idea. So, I mean, anyway, things like that are coming to my mind. But anyway, it's not my meeting. Councilman Martin.
I'd just like a clarification about what we're doing. It has been a couple weeks since we had our consultants here, and I sort of expected a summary. I thought you would speak, and we've sort of gone straight to the discussion and jumped over any summary of what's in the packet. Do you have something to say that we should listen to first before we begin this discussion?
I do, in fact.
Let's hear that first.
Yes, you may. Mayor Bagley, members of council. So the slide up on the screen is a summary slide of our discussion on July 16th. We had asked for your direction on several points, including the thresholds, which we intentionally left at the bottom of the table here to say, you know, the thresholds matter, and we asked for your direction on thresholds. There was a motion left on the table. However, all of these other incentives, nothing to do with the financial packages, were things that you asked us to bring to you as a council.
Cool, let's just get on with it. I move that we do not include parking reductions as an incentive in the affordable housing program. You know, meaning right now we allow them to have parking reductions in order to provide affordable housing, meaning if you meet the threshold, build it on site, or if you build 25% versus 12%, we would not include parking reductions as an incentive for affordable housing. No, I know we do, but what I mean is,
Beyond.
I think that should go away. Go ahead.
So are you saying you want to remove it?
I think it should be removed.
Okay.
So that's the motion. Is there a second? If not, it's not. All right, hasn't been seconded. So as far as parking reductions go, do we have a motion for parking reductions? I mean, this is basically the questions, right? So, so my question, here's my next question. Would it be easier to come back to this question once we have that number, that 25 or 24% number, Dr. Waters?
Let me try the parking motion. What I think popped up here is whether or not we've already approved, we have an ordinance that approves an incentive for parking reductions. This is wondering about further reductions, and it sounded like you wanted to remove existing.
I don't think that, so right.
I get it. We were hearing, don't put more streets or cars on our streets. So let me try this. If your motion was to not create further incentives for parking reductions, I would have seconded it. I didn't know if that's what you were moving. So let me move that we not do any further than what's already codified incentives for parking reductions.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Let's vote. Well, now you're in the queue. You would have. Councilmember Martin?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. When we were discussing Pike Road, we heard a lot about road diets. The idea that if the roads aren't wider, there won't be more traffic because it will be no fun to drive. And I wonder if the same principle applies to parking reduction, that if there's lots of parking all around, people will just keep their cars because it's easy to do. But if we have parking reductions, then people will think of alternatives to driving. And it seems to me that with the necessity of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions and the necessity of making room for people in our city, that one of the things that we should be looking at in everything we do is getting cars out of the city and making people turn to other means of transportation. So I think that I would be definitely against removing the old parking reduction incentives. And I'd like to hear a little bit of discussion and I'd like to hear maybe some comments from Aaron to about what we know about parking reductions, or for from anybody who would, Tariq, right? Is that
Tarek, yes.
Tarek, yeah. Is there data about that? If we have less parking, will we end up with less cars?
I will quickly respond to that, Mayor, Council Member. But before I do, one very quick point. You are doing a lot for affordable housing incentives, including and not limited to parking reductions. The things you asked for earlier in this discussion for getting data and financial numbers on how much is it saving a developer, that data will not exist. Getting parking right does not exist. You can never check that box. Zoning happens to be one of those living documents that you have to decide on something and see if people bite on the incentives over time. Whether or not it reduces greenhouse gases and helps with affordable housing and meets some of the other goals of the city, to be determined. You can chip away at it by choosing or not choosing to retain the current parking alternatives. But just for all of these under consideration tonight, I just want to let you know again, these are going above and beyond. You are already doing a lot for affordable housing.
And before I call Mayor Pro Tem, I'm probably going to vote against anything extra. I mean, the we do have a responsibility to like the 90% of Longmont that, doesn't require subsidies, or I'm just saying that every time we put in affordable housing, it's already too dense, too high, not enough parking, and anything additional that we do is just going to just add to that frustration and that consternation. Mayor Pro Tem?
Well, because Marcia asked for some comments, so I'll give some. On the parking, I understand what you're talking about, and I think it's good to discourage people driving excessively, but we're really only asking people who are poor to reduce their use of their cars. And they're not going to reduce the number of cars they have based upon the fact that they don't have a place to park it. They're going to just be mad, and they'll find another place to park it on the adjacent sidewalk, adjacent streets, and they'll just be mad, and the neighbors will be mad. But I do think that what we're doing right now, which is to reduce it by 1.5%, this is something that was asked for by the developers. And if you look at, say, they're providing 80 lots or 80 units, and then the developer should be providing 80 to 160 parking spaces that are each about 15 by 8. I think that's a parking. Okay. That's a lot of space if you reduce it by a third. So we are giving them a good incentive, and we're allowing the people who live there to have a car and a half. So I think that's a fair and a balanced way to do it without putting undue onus on the people who are living in that dwelling, and without putting undue problems on the adjacent neighborhood, and giving the developer a good incentive to, they're saving on having to give that land, provide that land for parking. They can use it for something else, and they don't have to put in the pavement and all the other stuff we require when we have a bigger parking lot. So to me, what we have is a good deal for everybody. It's fair to the developer. It gives them what they asked for. Nobody else asked for this. And it seems fair to all the other parties involved.
Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. The one incentive, or the one thing I would like us to talk about at some point, is allowing different housing types. For example, the cottage development. I really like that concept, and I really would like to see us, maybe not for affordable housing, but just in zoning in general, allow that in some zoning types. Because I think, especially with our aging population, the cottage concept could really be utilized for a segment of our population that needs housing. So that's what I would like to talk about.
All right, so I'm gonna stop the discussion, and I'm gonna say, somebody make a motion. What's the motion? What's the motion?
Not to expand parking reductions.
That's true. Okay, all right. So there's nobody in the queue regarding that motion. So let's go ahead and vote. All right, that passes unanimously. Okay. All right. The next person to get called on will have a motion. So if you don't have no thoughts, just motions. Councilmember Peck, because we don't think anyway. So just make a motion.
I move that we do not make any further adjustments or reductions to landscape standards.
Second. Mayor Pro Tem, okay, nobody's in the queue. Let's vote. Quickly, vote. That passes 6-1 with Councilmember Finley against. I move that we should not have a discussion regarding flexibility within the sustainability evaluation system until the SES is actually complete and we understand it. Let us vote. That was my contribution for the evening. That passes unanimously. Let's talk about density bonuses. Does somebody want to make a motion, Mayor Pro Tem?
What I want to suggest is that we do not grant further waivers or adjustments to site and building design standards. I think we have, once again, a good balance of things. When we start changing the too much about the design standards, then we have houses that are not really, they don't look as good. That's exactly the opposite of what we want. We want everything to be of high quality.
All right, so there's a motion. Is there a second? All right, the motion fails for lack of second. Can you repeat the motion?
Okay. I would like to not give further waivers or adjustments. We already have waivers and adjustments to site and building design standards. I would like to not grant further waivers or adjustments to site and building design standards. Do I have a second? Okay.
All right. And then are the Councilmember Martin and Dr. Waters, are you both in the queue for this issue? Okay. Councilmember Martin.
I'm going to support the motion, but I just want to say that I also support Councilmember Finley's idea that there really are additional housing types that could be considered, especially in service of density without sacrificing quality of life, which is what I think the cottage concept is about. Me too. So I think that we should put the expansion of allowed housing types on a future agenda, but not consider it now.
All right. So again, there's a motion on the floor. So the motion. That's right. So the motion on the floor is currently we are not going to provide additional incentives for site and building design standards. Dr. Waters?
Thanks, Mayor Bagley. I'd like, in the materials that we received, there's a bullet that specifically refers to allowing greater flexibility for affordable projects without compromising high-quality development. Could you offer an example or two of what that would be and look like, number one? And number two, so an example of relaxing standards or more flexibility in standards without compromising high-quality development, number one. Number two, what that would translate into in terms of potential cost reduction to a buyer, to a builder to build, a buyer to purchase.
Thank you, Mayor, Councilman. I can only answer the first question. I cannot get into the second financial piece of that because what somebody is willing to pay and what they view as quality really depends on the buyer. And you've highlighted the issue that this is very subjective. Building and site design standards are subjective by nature. One example, you asked for a good example. Many communities have masonry standards of up to 60 or even 85% in a lot of the Texas communities that I've worked in. Reducing that standard to, say, 50% masonry requirement, knowing that full well there are plenty of building materials out there that are deemed high quality by the construction industry, and a lot of people are buying those additional materials, does not disrupt the overall character unless you were very focused on brick is the only thing that we like. So that is just one example that durable materials can still be provided without a discrete example of one type of building material.
Thanks.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. As I'm familiar with lots of different building practices and materials and standards throughout the region due to my profession, I would say that the biggest thing is, in my opinion, making sure that the neighborhood protection standards would be in place while allowing for creative proposals to come forward that may qualify for an adjustment or waiver. And so that's why I won't be supporting this motion, because I think there could be the possibility that we get a really creative person that wants to bring in a great project, but if we don't relax these waivers or adjustments, they may not bring what we really want to the table. So that's where I'm standing on the issue.
Thank you. Councilmember Finley?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I absolutely agree with that. I think if there's some flexibility, people will bring those creative ideas forward, and then we can take a look at those and make sure that they are high quality. our staff can make sure. They can advise us as to whether they're high quality. But there's all kinds of new building materials and ideas that we should be able to look at. So I'm all for flexibility. I will not be voting for the motion.
All right. Mayor Pro Tem?
Once again, what we're voting on is not whether we have some flexibility. We already have that flexibility and some of those waivers, and I certainly agree with that too. I'm very familiar with lots of different architectural styles and lots of different materials, and we do need to be flexible about those. But this, what we're talking about is granting further waivers and adjustments. I don't want things to be sinking below a certain rate. I'd like to just, we can always adjust this in time. I would like to keep it the way it is for now.
Councilmember Peck?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. In reading the council communication, it is saying that council is considering establishing the SES for developmental projects within the city, and as that's being developed, projects or exemptions from certain components of the system, that's what this is addressing. And this option requires further discussion as the SES system is further evaluated. Oh, I'm sorry, I did.
That's
Not the same.
No.
And that's what you did. It is contagious.
Right. All right. Councilmember Martin?
Never mind.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I think we need to be flexible for waivers and adjustments on site and building standards because new building materials are coming in all the time. But I don't see any reason, and in fact I see a reason against, which is I think what Councilmember Christensen was pointing out, against applying that flexibility differently to affordable housing versus any other housing. You know, we should be flexible all the time, as long as our quality standards are met.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. This one would be for Planner Fosdick. What is our flexibility range right now? Is this really a moot point? Are we really discussing a moot point where we have this flexibility already, regardless of additional threshold for additional affordable housing?
Mayor Bagley, Councilmember Rodriguez, we have residential as well as multifamily and mixed-use design standards in the books. There's a lot of different elements that are covered within those. Really what the idea was here is, do we take our existing standards and somehow modify those for projects that are providing affordable housing? We weren't really at this point contemplating how we apply general flexibility within this. I mean, that could be something we look at, but really what we were contemplating based on the research that Clarion had done is, you know, to Tarek's example, do we have a standard that we could then modify for projects providing some amount of affordable housing, not overall flexibility necessarily? So I think there are certain sections in our code that, you know, maybe could be deemed as flexible, but it's pretty specific in terms of materials and design.
All right, there's currently a motion and nobody left in the queue, and I think most of us have spoken twice. So let's go ahead and vote. The motion is, Mayor Pro Tem said that we should not, the motion is not to have additional, help me out, Mayor Pro Tem, waivers, additional waivers and adjustments and/or adjustments to building design standards beyond the incentives that we already have. So let's go ahead and vote. Yes means no more. All right, that the motion fails with Councilmember Rodriguez, Councilmember Finley, Councilmember Peck, and Dr. Waters against, and the rest of us for. All right. It means that if somebody has a motion, they can, bring it back. All right, Dr. Waters?
So I move that we do allow, that we ask would you be proposing to bring back what the revised, what the statement of flexibility or a parameter for subsequent action, if given direction to do so? Is that the way this would work?
Correct. Mayor, Councilman, We would bring those items back in addition to the top two in this
I
table
get it.
tonight.
So I'm going to move that we give, we request or give direction to bring back the specific flexibility or statement of flexibility or parameters that the consultant and our staff would recommend that we consider for greater design standard flexibility.
Would those include height and density bonuses as well?
We've already done that.
Those are separate issues handled by dimensional
No,
standards.
I know, that's what I'm saying, but would those also include bringing back
Well, they're
height
going to bring
and
those
density?
back. We've already given direction
Okay,
for them to bring those
perfect.
back.
Then let's go ahead and vote. Anybody else want to debate this issue? The people in the queue were already in there before the motion, so. It's been seconded. If not, I would have seconded it. Mayor Pro Tem, Councilmember Martin, I mean, you're. Okay, Councilmember Martin.
But in the confusion, I may have forgotten what it was. So, right, we don't want to leave this idea in limbo, so even though I don't think the standard should be different, I'm still going to vote for the motion because we should make a decision.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem?
I want to speak on the next one, expansion of allowed housing types.
Okay, you'll be in the queue then, all right? All right, let's go ahead and vote. The motion is, Dr. Waters, help me out here. For staff to bring back recommendations pertaining to the site and building design standards. All right. That passes unanimously. All right, Mayor Pro Tem?
I vote that we do bring back a discussion of expansion of allowed housing types, which is what is in this handy booklet that I'm pushing, and also hear about cottage zoning, which is done in Kansas City and Texas and various places. But that's precisely what I want us to continue discussing, is a variety of housing, let's just leave it there. But I thank Councilman Finley for bringing that forward because I know it's something that both of us are very passionate about.
Councilmember Peck? Oh, wait.
Oh,
Was that
so
seconded?
Yes. Okay.
All right, Councilmember Peck. All right, let's go ahead and vote. The motion is to have staff bring back recommendations pertaining to the expansion of allowed housing types with a strong suggestion that they read the book, Making Room. Hold it up. Making Room, let's get it on the record here. Give it to me so the camera's on me. Housing for a Changing America. All right, that's been seconded. Yes, so let's go ahead and vote. We might have just avoided a Friday meeting. Okay, so that passes unanimously. All right, so I believe that hits on everything, correct? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Peck?
Have we addressed lot size and lot width?
Well, actually, no, we already,
Yep.
yeah, we already talked about threshold, and the motion was to get data and bring it back.
Well, there's some suggestions in here, though, about it.
If somebody wants to make a motion, they can make a
All right,
motion.
I'm going to move that developments providing affordable housing beyond the 12%, the requirement would be eligible for further reductions of minimum lot size and lot width standards to 40 feet. We ready to do that?
Yeah.
You've already.
So we talked about it, we
I didn't-
talked about it. We said we said 50. Did we say 40? Yes. I thought I had asked about 50. We already have it at 50. Right? It's 50 now. It's not 50 now. No, because we had the same discussion, and, go ahead.
Mayor, members of council, when we talked about the lot width and lot area discussion, the motion was to have staff bring back different examples for lot areas and lot widths because there is no one number that would serve all of the zoning districts within the city. So we would have to bring that item back to you. That was already the approved motion, as was height bonuses with further protections. We have not yet discussed the density bonuses or officially the thresholds because we removed that motion earlier tonight.
All right. Councilmember Rodriguez.
Okay, so one thing we've also heard from the residents is how they are reacting to the already increased density bonuses that we've put in the code. And while it is my personal opinion to add more density, I don't think that we should do it as fast, so fast. And so I would say that we do not, at this time, allow additional density bonuses above and beyond those that we have already instituted.
All right, there were people in the queue before the motion was made. Is there anyone in the queue currently who want to address this specific motion? All right, let's vote. Yes, you can still be in the queue. Yeah, Councilmember Peck. Oh, so Dr. Waters.
So it does seem to me that I appreciate the thinking behind the motion, but I just would be curious if the staff has recommendations to make, that these don't apply everywhere. They're going to be tied to a threshold, and then they might be very, very targeted. In these areas, under these conditions, you know, we think it would be worth considering. So, you know, I can think of a whole bunch of parts of our community where NIMBY issues wouldn't surface, where it might make sense to have some flexibility and to just take that off the board without giving any opportunity to see at least a record. We're not approving anything other than bringing something back. I guess I'd like to see what the staff might bring back.
And I get, just as a thought, again, this is an example of, you know, 7 non-experts, you know, giving direction to staff on things that we know nothing about. And I would rather, I mean, on all these issues, I mean, I would love to see staff come back and go, these are best practices. This is what would work. This is what wouldn't work. This is going to tick people off. This is not going to tick people off. This has been done really well in Fort Collins or Guam or whatever. I mean, so this whole process to me is a little frustrating, but oh well. Councilman, or Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, are we still discussing the last thing we need to discuss, the threshold for additional incentives? Where are we now? We're back to density bonuses, okay.
And there was a motion, but was there a motion? Yes. And that motion was seconded? Correct. The motion is not to allow additional density bonuses other than those that are already provided for in the Affordable Housing Code.
Oh, okay, I'm in support of that. I thought we were discussing the last one. So, let's vote.
Councilmember Martin or Councilmember Peck, do you have things to talk about regarding this particular issue?
Yeah, I do.
Okay,
I
Councilmember Peck.
kind of agree with Councilmember Waters, but my problem is with the density, I think it has to go along with zoning, because just to let staff without any direction approve high density in an area that is not really set for high density in a residential area, for example, I can see on North 287 where we could have high density, but until in our zoning that we specifically add that, or to our land codes or whatever, I'm not going to be in favor of just making it a blanket density.
Okay, Councilmember Martin.
I have a similar point. We have already agreed that in the future we want to consider expansion of allowed housing types, and some housing types are really neighborhood types. And those might inherently have different sensible densities than the housing types and neighborhood plans that we allow today. So while I don't think we should try to increase the codified plans that we have now for neighborhoods, and we shouldn't add any more density bonuses now, we shouldn't take that off the table when we expand allowed housing types. And I am honestly a little confused, and maybe the Mayor Pro Tem would tell me the right thing to do, because I'm not sure whether that means a yes vote or no vote on the way the motion is. And
The
I'm
motion
not
is, the motion currently on the table is that we are not going to allow additional density bonuses other than that which is already provided for in the Affordable Housing Code. So
Okay.
a vote, yes vote means no more, meaning
Okay.
we're sticking with what we got.
All right.
Dr. Waters?
Thank you. So the motion or the staff question here isn't about blanket bonus, blanket density flexibility or authority. It is to bring back to us when greater flexibility might be applied if there's a threshold that's met.
Would you like to make a motion to table this motion until staff has had the opportunity to bring back additional information
Well, I'm
and
going to vote
suggestions?
against the motion.
Okay.
Now, the reason I'm going to vote against the motion, because I'd like to see what the staff would bring, right? What conditions and where, and if it's tied to zoning, what that would look like. But to say we're not interested in any of that, given what the possibilities might be, without creating NIMBY issues or, you know, inspiring NIMBY responses and all the other things that we know we can anticipate. I guess I don't understand why we wouldn't want to see their best thinking.
There's nobody in the queue, but I would move that we table this motion until we've had the opportunity to suggest that have staff come back and give a presentation as to density bonuses that would be advantageous and increase our affordable housing without instigating a NIMBY response from surrounding neighbors in those particular areas. Motion to table motion supersedes the motion. So it's been moved and seconded. Mayor Pro Tem? I would vote for it. I just want to hear what they have to say.
I guess I would like to put a halt on density bonuses beyond what we have now, so that we could just stop for a little bit and have a more nuanced discussion, as Councilman Martin suggested about, and also Councilman Waters, about areas where it's more appropriate to have high-density housing, such as down the hill on 287, as opposed to up high on the hill on North Main. And areas where it's more appropriate to have high-density housing. For instance, you know, I'm talking about 5 or 6 stories on Pratt Parkway, as opposed to Alta Street, where.
We already have I believe we already had a motion.
Okay.
That
So I
went
would
towards height, and they were going to bring
right,
back
but
ideas.
Density is also the same thing, and I do one more point though. I would like to. When we have this discussion, I would like us to also discuss the way things are noticed in neighborhoods, because right now what's going on is sort of to me it's a free-for-all. In the last year, I have had 3 places on my block that required multiple waivers. I have never been noticed there was no sign. I have not received any form of communication about any of these building things that all required waivers.
All right, well, let's go ahead and, no, that's fine. Let's bring that up.
That's another
let's
discussion,
go
but
ahead and
it does have something to do with the way things are being developed in terms of density. We have to have a pause and have more nuanced and more detailed discussion.
All right, so again, basically the motion currently on the floor is to table this to allow staff to do with density what we all agreed should do with height. Go ahead, Ms. Fosdick. Did you see that respect I threw your way, Aaron? Did you?
I appreciate that, Mayor Bagley. Council, I do just want to point out with regard to, we did talk a lot about density and height during the Envision Longmont update as well as the code update. And so I just want to make sure, that we all understand we have identified the appropriate areas for increased density as well as building height, and that's done through zoning. So in the comp plan, we've identified those areas of change. We subsequently updated our code with the assistance from Clarion. So we have done a lot of that work. We tend to find that moving away from the density conversation is actually a little bit more productive, because oftentimes, even me as a planner, you can't really look at a building and say, the density is X units per acre. There's so much dependency there. And we're happy to try to bring you back some information. But in all honesty, I think we're going to really struggle to find solutions that will work for everyone in the community as they relate to increased density and height, because those are often the things that agitate people the most. And so I think, there's not necessarily a sweet spot of X units per acre will not anger people. We do offer a 20% density bonus currently. That's not necessarily something that we've seen a lot of use. depending on what we do with our lot standards and our size and dimensional reductions, we may need corresponding density bonuses, but that's not something we're seeing a lot of interest in. So just some more food for thought. You know, we do have the 20% currently, so I just wanted to remind you all of that as well.
Right. All right, so there's a motion on the table to table the motion until staff has had the opportunity to come back and present exactly what Ms. Fosdick just said. So let's vote. Right, which is tabling the motion in a very nice way. It passes 6-1 with Councilmember Peck against. And we are going to go, we've been going for 2 hours. Let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break. Well, if you want my, no, we're going to take 10 minutes. Sorry. That's right. going to be, threshold, although I thought we already had, so Dr. Waters, I know you're gonna make a motion, but I thought we were gonna have him bring back data. I thought we already made a motion on threshold. Go ahead. Okay, well, all right, go ahead. Dr. Waters?
Just clarify, were you going to bring back something on?
'Kay.
So I'm going to move that we set 20% as a threshold. That's 175% of our current requirement.
Okay, let's vote. Councilmember Martin?
Within
I'm
my
not,
right.
no, I'm not acting.
I know. I oppose this because I think we should set the threshold after we understand what the staff's recommendations are.
I agree with that, even if there's no data, at least getting some thoughts. Councilmember Finley?
I would agree that it would depend on which thing we're looking at as to the threshold for me. I would need more information.
All right, let's go ahead and vote. All right, that passes 4-3. The motion passes 4-3 with Councilmember Rodriguez, Councilmember Peck, Mayor Pro Tem Christensen, and Dr. Waters, 4. So threshold is now 20%. All right, let's move on to something else. So wait a second, affordable housing financial incentives. Oh, boy. No? What do you mean? What do you mean, no? Yeah, we're moving on to that. I just heard a couple people on council scream, no, but nope. No. Affordable housing financial incentives. Yeah, sure. Councilmember Peck?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I'm going to try this one more time, just for fun. I move that any development which includes a metro district not be able to apply for financial incentives that the service plan for the district covers. For example, a percentage of the development fees for water sewer systems amounts to, wait a minute, one more thing. Shoot. For example, if it's infrastructure fees and waivers, then if the service plan includes that, then they shouldn't get any financial waivers. Does that make sense?
I personally don't really understand.
You
So-
don't understand?
But
Okay.
that's all right, which means it's been moved and seconded. There's no one in the queue. Let us vote. That the motion fails 4-3 with council members Finley, myself, Councilmember Martin, and Dr. Waters against, and the other 3 for. Ms. Fedler?
So Mayor and Council, Kathy Fedler, Housing and Community Investment Division Manager. And this presentation is just going to be so much more exciting than the last one was.
I'm
I
already
guarantee
excited.
it. Probably fall
It's
asleep.
like I have a puppy. It's awesome.
As we get started, I do want to let you know that I'm going to ask a few questions at the end. They are mostly outlined in the council communication with a couple of others that were related to some housekeeping items as well. In general, this is just an overview of the financial incentives the city's been providing for about 26 years to developments that include affordable housing. Periodically, it makes sense to review and do some cleanup, and we're making sure all land development and financial incentives align with the inclusionary housing ordinance and are incentivizing the areas and housing types and needs that we want to be sure are addressed. So the first thing is development fee waivers. So this has been in place since 1993. It's where the city forgoes the fees that would otherwise be paid by developments that meet the minimum inclusionary housing requirements. So for instance, when providing 12% affordable housing, this amounts to about a $5,400 fee reduction per single-family home, so it saves the developer about that much for every affordable single-family home built, and about $1,800 per multifamily home, so rental apartments or a condo or townhouse is in between there, but condo and apartments are about $1,800. And then we also have fee subsidies. So this is where it's also in place since 1993. It's where a percentage of development fees that have to be kept whole, have to be paid, the water sewer system development fees, the electric community investment fund, et cetera, are actually paid or subsidized by the Affordable Housing Fund to those other funds. They must construct affordable housing units in excess of the minimum. That's in the code. So they have to provide above 12%. Right now, this has been averaging about an additional $5,900 per single family home and an additional $2,400 per multifamily home, in addition to the slide on the other. What this has meant, and in the past several years, who has received this subsidy has been mostly Habitat, building single-family for sale homes. They are at 100% affordable housing, so that's their bonus. The Housing Authority and Housing Development Corporation, again, they're at 100% affordable housing. Usually they have received the fee subsidies. And right now, Blue Vista is receiving the fee subsidy. They're at 25% affordable housing. Let's see. So the updates that I wanted to run through and talk about with you as part of the financial incentives are there currently is on the books a subsidy to cover costs of soil amendments. This can be removed. We're no longer, we are requiring the soil amendments, but we're no longer allowing for a subsidy to cover that. It's no longer needed. And then aligning the period of affordability to align with the inclusionary housing ordinance. So right now, the code says 10 years for single-family homes or for sale homes and 20 years for rental, so that needs to be changed to permanent affordability. Also in the code, it prioritizes certain subpopulations for bonus points to get fee waivers. So this is at the 12%, or even at the higher level as well. So the prioritized subpopulations right now are large families, units, agricultural workers, if the development is going to serve agricultural workers, if they're serving homeless, elderly, setting aside units for the elderly, and or the physically disabled. So the question is, do we want to consider changes? And I'll go through the questions again at the end, but coming up. Do we want to consider changes to any of these? So for instance, for single family homes, right now we don't know exactly what the breakdown of what is currently coming in, because that's not something we track. As people pull building permits, it doesn't track if they're 3-bedroom or 2-bedroom or 4-bedroom. But that mostly seems to be 3 and 4-bedroom units in single family homes. For apartments and condos, it seems to be mostly 1 and 2 bedrooms. As more families are renting, folks are renting, do we need to incentivize larger size units for families in rental? In the census, the majority of our homes in our current housing stock have 3 bedrooms. So about 35% of our current built housing stock have 3 bedrooms. And I've got the breakdown for more than no bedrooms, so if they're efficiency units, 1 bedroom, et cetera. And right now, 20% of our units are 4-bedroom, and 6% are 5 or more bedrooms. So that's one area that we might want to consider changing, what is that subpopulation or what incentives we want to provide there. The thing with the agricultural workers, in looking at how people are employed right now in Longmont, this is something that is changed since the code went into effect in 1993. So looking at the occupation for civilian employed over 16, there's 500 people in Longmont that are employed in agriculture, forestry, fishing, hunting, and mining. So those are all combined. Detailed census information broke out agricultural workers at a total of 110 in Longmont. So this doesn't seem to be a high need area anymore. And the other categories probably are okay. I would say that just for your information, this is something we could look at as we do our consolidated plan updates every 5 years, where we really look at the breakdown of demographics and where the needs are in employment as well as housing. So that's something that we could tie and every 5 years look at. The raw water deficit incentive was recently added. It's where a percentage of raw water deficits can be covered by raw water dedications that have been set aside for affordable housing. This is a highly valuable incentive. No one else that we could find in Colorado is offering this. And currently it amounts to about a value of $15,300 per acre foot. So it's so new, no one's taken advantage of it yet, but we have had discussions with several different developments that do have raw water deficits and are looking to develop. So I think it could be a very valuable one. So what this is coming from is the Water Board, I guess it was, set aside some dedications up to 1,200 acre foot to support economic development efforts. That hasn't been widely used, so the Water Board approved using 400 of those 1,200 to support affordable housing and see how that goes. So that's an incentive right now that is allowed at 12%. And the question that's going to be asked is, because it's very valuable, should it stay at 12% or should it be only available if you're doing more than the minimum? The following changes are being recommended by Public Works and LPC to better align fees with their ability to be waived or subsidized. I did put a page at your desk that shows the red line changes, as well as on the other side is the original that you got in your packet. So there's just a couple of changes. That are being proposed. So one is to keep the electric community investment fee together and not split that out by residential and commercial, and put it under the subsidized category. Move the electric meter and water meter fees up to the subsidized category from not waived or subsidized right now. And LPC is fine with that because it keeps the fund whole because the Affordable Housing Fund would pay for that. And we could remove the Windy Gap surcharge. That is not separately calculated. It's part of the water sewer fees, so that could come out. On your revised red line, I did highlight in red the items that are the deferred fees, so those are deferred to CO. All the other ones are paid at building permit. So I'm ready to go into the questions unless you have questions about some of this information first.
Mayor Pro Tem, do you have any questions, or you just, you're in the queue?
Yeah. Are we talking about, we're going to go into questions, generalized questions of your, I'm sorry, generalized questions of your whole presentation?
Right, so if you
Okay.
have general questions, fine. Otherwise, I can go right into the questions that I'm going to ask for feedback. Maybe we should look at the questions.
Okay. No, I have some other questions that I
Okay.
want to ask first. So, This is to clarify, I just want to clarify that people, these fees and waivers are only available to people who actually construct homes, not people who are using payment in lieu.
Correct.
Okay. So, I would, I would like to know the cost of the fees eligible to be waived. I understand this is not, not a simple answer, but for instance, if you could give me a house that costs $350,000, well, let's say $400,000. Can you give me an estimate of about how much the taxpayer is subsidizing these fees that are waived would be would cost the taxpayers?
So probably,
Or just a percentage. You don't have to give me a dollar.
I have got, so a Blue Vista house, which is affordable, selling for $260,000.
Okay.
The total fees that are owed per home is about $22,000.
Okay.
The waived fees are $6,500. The subsidized fees are $5,900. So those are actually being paid by the Affordable Housing Fund.
Yeah.
So what I guess you'd say the taxpayers are subsidizing is the $6,500. And then they're actually paying, the developer is still paying $9,500. So we're waiving or subsidizing $12,000. 22,
about
12,
half of what
and
they
9.
would be paying.
I'm sorry?
A little over
It's about
half of what they'd be
60%.
paying.
60%, yep.
Yeah.
And it
that's all.
changes by development.
Yes.
Sometimes it's 75%, sometimes it's 50%.
Right.
It depends on what they're providing, what the points they get, if they get any of those subpopulation bonus points.
Yeah, okay, that's good to know because it gives people sort of a baseline. It gives me a baseline of just how much the taxpayers are helping subsidize this. And I question whether we should be waiving quite so many things, but, the other things I had were comments on these different aspects. So I'll wait till everybody else has a chance to ask questions.
Dr. Waters?
Just following up a bit, the actual taxpayer support was the $6,500. I understand there's a combination. One's a subsidy, one's a deferral or a.
Let me make sure, but yes. I think
So.
that's right. Yep.
That would be on a $260,000 home. So I'm trying to do calculate the math in my head quickly. What percent is 6,500 of $260,000? 3 or 4%.
Yeah.
So, well, whatever. I can do the math. I just haven't done it on the fly. But as a percentage, it's what we've budgeted in the Affordable Housing Fund.
No, the waived fees are just foregone.
But the subsidized fees.
The subsidized fees come from the Affordable Housing Fund.
That's the
so they're,
6,500.
It's I think I have my contacts in the wrong eyes. 5,800.
The 5,800. So the 5,800 is coming from the Affordable Housing Fund.
Correct.
Which is either what we've budgeted through the general fund, which we expected to be used that way, or
payment in lieu
payment in
from
lieu
developers.
as that
right.
accumulates.
Right.
And as a percentage, it's
As well.
it's pretty small of the total cost, even for an affordable home. All right, thanks.
All right. You may, Dr. Waters.
I'm sorry, before I yield. And is the question or is the proposal that these additional subsidies or waivers are only available if certain thresholds are met?
The subsidies per code have to provide more than the minimum.
So it could be 13%.
It could be.
Or we could set it at a 20% to be
Correct.
consistent with what we've just done.
Correct, and I would like some direction if you're ready to give it, or I can bring back some information.
Do you have a recommendation on
Well,
what
right
that threshold
now,
should be?
for instance, the ones that have been using it are either at 100% or, like I said, Blue Vista's at 25%.
So it wouldn't be
It'd be
unreasonable
nice
to
to
set it.
be, it would be nice to be an even percentage and not a weird 12% percentage. Just for ease
Would
of
you consider
calculation.
25% an even?
Evener than 24%.
So, do you want that kind of direction?
If you're ready to give it.
We can go through the questions too.
All right.
Yep.
and get there.
Then we'll wait.
Okay. All right. Anything else before?
No, I move that the definition of large family units remain at 3 or more. All right, that I move that don't, there's no second. I move the definition of large family units change to 4 or more bedrooms. All right, let's vote. Just gonna do this the easy way. All right, that passes 6-1 with Councilmember Rodriguez against. I move that the special needs category of agricultural worker remain the same. Second. All right, let's vote. Oh, Mayor Pro Tem?
I would like to point out that one of the many things that have changed about agricultural workers, this may seem small, given that we have 110 estimated agricultural workers. Formerly, agricultural workers did have housing. They don't anymore. And they actually worked on farms. Now they mostly work on or a lot of them work on open space where they cannot live. So they have actually no housing that they can live on. So I do think that this is still a need. And the other thing is, agricultural workers mostly work in the summer. Homeless people are mostly really at risk in the fall, in the winter and fall and spring. There's a kind of interesting nexus here, and there are many other places where people have created shared housing that serves agricultural workers in the summer and homeless people in the winter. And so I'm just pointing out the fact that these are not necessarily people who don't have anything to do with any of the rest of the problems that we have. We could perhaps create an interesting synergy here. So I'm going to vote for leaving this as
The same.
special needs population.
We're keeping it. So the motion is that the special needs category of agricultural workers remain the same. It not be removed, nor should it be changed. Let's vote. All right, that passes unanimously. And I move that no other subpopulations receive bonus points. So should the other subpopulations remain for bonus points? I move that the other subpopulation. I move that the other subpopulations remain for bonus points. All right, let's vote. Sorry. I could barely. Get rid of them. We have too many. No, like I said, I'm just trying to move this along. I don't have an opinion one way or another. I'm just trying to get us to give staff some direction. And I had, as I told City Council before we started, I was at the ophthalmologist and my eyes are dilated and I can barely read tonight. And I have a puppy underneath my desk, which that's all right. Actually, I got rid of the puppy. I don't know where he went. I'm running a meeting here. If you see a German Shepherd puppy, bring him back. And I'm just kidding. Mariah Younger, thank you for watching my puppy. All right. So question 4, should the raw water deficits be provided at 12%? I move that the raw water deficits be provided at 12%. It's been moved and seconded. Can we clear the voting? All right, Mayor Pro Tem?
I would much rather have that because it is a very valuable incentive. I would rather have that only available to people who are providing 20% which is consistent with our other,
So you want it, you would move, you wanted it at
Well,
20%?
yes.
So the question, let me put it this way, before we vote on this, just straw poll. Just everybody say a percentage. What should the raw water deficit be provided at? I made a motion for 12%. Dr. Waters, say a number. Okay, 25%. 25. Mayor Pro Tem? 25? 12. All right. I withdraw my motion. I move that the raw water deficits be provided at 25%. All right, let's vote. I can vote against it, but I cannot speak against it pursuant to the rules. All right, that passes 4 with Councilmember Finley, myself, and Councilmember Peck against. All right. Are there any other, sorry, could we get the, okay. Are there any proposed changes for the fee categories that we would like to make? Not discuss, but does someone have a motion? Councilmember Peck, specifically on fee categories. All right, I move that we direct staff stating that the changes proposed for the fee categories are okay as shown. Yes. Dr. Waters? All right, let's vote. All right, let's go ahead and everybody push the button again. No, really, press hard. Press harder, Mayor Pro Tem. Saying that you've got a weak thumb. You do not. I'm pretty sure it was a unanimous vote, but I'm not sure. It's all right. Voting ended. Okay, vote 18. Let's vote again. All right. All right. It was a unanimous vote. That passes unanimously. All right. Anything else you want to consider? No, because no one's in the queue. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, Councilmember Peck.
Kathy, did you want something on the soil amendments to be removed from the?
That would be part of the one you just made, yeah,
Okay,
because it wasn't on the list.
okay, thanks.
All right. Let's go ahead and talk about council direction on ballot issues for the November 2019 ballot.
Mayor Bagley, members of council, Sandy Cedar, Assistant City Manager. And I am assisting with content for your ballot issues this year. So what you have in front of you is draft wording that staff created with very little legal direction. So once we have content established from the council, we'll make sure that legal is able to take a look at all of these things, prepare ordinances and resolutions. All of those have to be passed by the end of August. So today we are looking for content, not necessarily specific wording, because we will let the attorneys do that at that point. So you have 4 different items that you have given us previous direction on. We'd just like to go through each of those with you and make sure that you're comfortable with the content that we're adding.
Councilmember Peck, do you have something to say? You're in the queue. All right. Okay.
Okay. So the first one is the street sales tax permanency. And so this would essentially state that instead of having a sunset in 2025, that the street tax would be a permanent tax, no more sunset. There is not a bonding authority that goes along with this. That's something that the council did express, that there was maybe some interest in, but then determined to do the quiet zones in a phased approach. So that's why this looks like this. Is this the intent of your ballot issue for a street sales tax?
So Councilmember Finley?
I would move that we place this on the ballot, and the reason is because we're always going to have roads, and they're always going to be needing repair. And I would like to see them repaired, and so therefore, that is my motion.
Is there anyone else in the queue that wants to speak directly? Okay, Councilmember Rodriguez?
Just to clarify, though bonding authority is not inherent in the question, it doesn't preclude us from instituting bonding authority in the future, does it?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else on this issue? Mayor Pro Tem?
I originally have been for just extending this to be permanent because, as Councilman Finley said, we're always going to have roads, we're always going to need. On the other hand, these taxes tend to be a slippery. I was moved by what former city manager Gordon Petro said. These things kind of become a slippery soup, and then all of the things that we ask the public to okay become permanent, and they never get a chance to examine it again. This becomes a permanent tax, and it also takes it out of the possibility of, it leads to inflexibility for the city and for the voters. And so I think I would prefer to keep bringing it back every 10 years and ask the voters to reauthorize it, rather than institute a permanent tax that could then turn into a bond that really becomes, gives us very little flexibility financially.
Dr. Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Bagley. So if this doesn't become a permanent tax, then our only options for financing quiet zones will be cash funded or grant funded, which seems to me to be constraining what the city's options are. So in the interest of what we've heard and what I feel like we've committed to, I understand the staff recommendation was to begin cash funding, look for grants, and if this passes, then potentially the staff brings back, or the staff or the council gives direction on a bonding question, bonding authority to accelerate and sustain the quiet zone initiative, or something else.
Correct, because if you remember when we went over the other street projects, specifically the diagonal in Hover and some of those were included in how we could approach that situation.
I just think it gives us more, not less, flexibility, and we can always this or some subsequent council could always bring this back and put it on a ballot to repeal.
Councilmember Peck.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I'm not in favor of having it be in perpetuity. One of the main reasons is because I know in 2020 there's going to be a huge state transportation tax again, and from my perspective, we absolutely have to pass that. If we have this tax extended, it's not going to be looked at very favorably about doing another transportation tax. So since this doesn't come due till 2026, I'm going to vote against having it in perpetuity.
Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I favor having this tax extended into perpetuity for almost the same reason as Councilmember Peck gave for not extending it. What we know about human behavior is that when there's a lot of stuff on the ballot, people tend to vote no, and this will become something that doesn't have to be on the ballot to maintain the status quo. We also did discuss the relationship of this with our probability of success in getting quiet zones funded and implemented, and I think those two are overriding reasons in favor of doing this. And since it does not increase the overall tax rate, I would disagree that, respectfully, that it is going to have any effect on how people vote in 2020.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and, nobody else is in the queue, but I'm going to go ahead and rule on a point of order here. Or make a point of order, and that is, my understanding is we already voted to put this on the ballot. Right, so we've already had a motion, and I personally was persuaded by Gordon Pedro's comment that, I do believe that I think it's a mistake to do it in perpetuity. I really do. But we voted on this. And so until there's a new council, if there's even one of us who currently are saying, no, 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 I want to move forward, the time to vote for reconsideration was long ago. So at this point, the real question is, anybody have any problems with the wording and the issue? And so I believe that we've not heard any issues with the wording. So, Yeah, if we start now. All right, okay. Yeah, now, that said, I would move that we revisit the motion to grant airport hangar number 52 to Hank Menendez. I'm just kidding. I don't remember if that was actually the guy's name, but it's something storage. No, just kidding. All right, Councilmember Martin?
Are we ready to go on to item number 2?
We are.
I move that we remove the library annex from the language on the competitive pool and ice rink tax increase and bond authorization.
All right, that's been moved and seconded. I'm going to vote for that only because I am actually going to get behind Councilmember Peck, the library district. Are you pro library district? No, I know, but the thing is that if we're going to do a library plan, you know, I want to make sure that we do it right. So just because I don't want it, and so I think that it would be more likely to pass, but I'm committing to you in public that I'll get behind it with you. So, all right, Mayor Pro Tem?
I am for removing that information or that library district because, and Councilman Waters is on the Library Advisory Board, so he could give more information about that. The Library Advisory Board specifically does not really want this in this ballot issue for a number of reasons, and I'm comfortable with what their suggestion is, so I'm for this proposal of removing the library annex from the original ballot language.
All right, let's go ahead and vote. So a positive vote is to remove the library annex from the ballot measure pertaining to the pool and ice rink. That passes unanimously. Okay?
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, the only other issue which former city manager also brought up was the sunset for this tax. The way that it's written right now, there is no sunset on this tax.
I actually would move that we sunset this tax based upon the date that the finance department determines that we will have paid off the facility. All right, anybody want to speak against this motion? Let's vote. You want to?
Wait.
Council? Oh, okay. Jim Golden wants to speak against the motion. Here he comes.
So Mayor Bagley, members of council, Jim Golden, Chief Financial Officer. So this tax is sized for not only the debt, but also for an O&M subsidy, and that's an ongoing expense. So keep that in mind before you make your motion and vote.
When I tell staff that we want direction, that is what I mean. I mean, stop. You guys are idiots. You're going to destroy our city. That's what I'd like to hear more often, Harold. Thank you, Mr. Golden. Please submit a resume.
Thanks, Jim. I'd forgotten.
All right, so I'm
that
going to
piece.
withdraw my motion and actually change it to I move that we actually accept the ballot measure as written. Okay, Mayor Pro Tem?
I do think the people of this city need to carefully examine whether they want to pay for the maintenance of this one facility in perpetuity with a bond. Or, I'm sorry, this is a sales tax.
It's both pieces. It's both a sales tax and a bond in one, one question.
And I think that's pretty carefully explained in the language here. And so I would reinstate Mayor Bagley's idea of removing the language of this being in perpetuity. I do not think that's a good idea. I do understand, but I think that people should really know what they're voting for.
Councilmember Peck.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. My frustration with it, and I think it does need to be sunsetted, is that the feasibility study, from the way I interpreted it, plainly said we can't afford this. We can't afford to operate this. So the other thing is in the communication, it also says, shoot, I just
Point of order, I do not think it said la da 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 da
I think it did,
in the
la la land.
communication. Please do not lie. Okay, thank you.
Wait a minute, I'm going to find it because
I'm just kidding, Kelly.
So it said, could include expansion or rehabilitation of existing facilities or the addition of new capital improvements. Is that specifically for this event center, or is it for other capital improvements?
That was an option that was put in. Do what? Yeah.
Jim to come back down.
Yeah, so that was an option that was put in if council wanted to consider having another funding source, because in that it says the public improvement fund can't support some of these other, there's not enough capacity in it. And so if you say you want to sunset the capital piece, then that eliminates that provision within that.
So my question, and I think you explained it, but I didn't really understand it, is that are we saying that this ongoing tax is not only for the construction of the pool and O&M, but it's also for any other capital improvement within the city?
Based on the way I understand the motion is there's two components to the tax. There is a sunsetted component that's related to the capital piece, and that will sunset when the debt ends. There is an ongoing O&M component that pays for the operational cost of it.
Does it currently, the ballot measure sunsets the capital?
Based on the motion you just gave us.
Correct. No, the motion was not that. It was to
Oh.
accept the ballot measure as currently written.
So then that keeps it going.
Correct.
The
So my
capital
question
piece.
is, would it be possible to sunset the capital and continue with the O&M?
Mhm.
No, not right
No,
now.
no, not right
So
now.
I'm going to actually withdraw my motion and restate a new one, which is I move that we accept the ballot measure, but with the change stating that we will sunset the capital costs, but not the O&M costs.
I still want this explained. I'm sorry, I'm not. With no sunset on the tax, once it's fully repaid, the city would have the funding capacity to consider another bond issue to address other city capital improvements. That's not what really people are voting for. They're voting for the pool, not to be taxed for other city capital improvements.
My motion would fix that. It would sunset the capital costs.
While keeping the O&M
While
costs.
keeping the O&M.
So after the bonds are repaid, Councilmember Peck,
Goes
once
away.
the bonds are repaid, then some of the tax increase still needs to be spent for O&M, but some of it would be freed up to either rebond, if that's what the council chose to go out to do, or to use for other expenses.
So that the tax, it is imperative in the language that the ongoing tax is only for O&M. It is not to be bonded for other city capital
Correct.
improvements.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
All right, does anyone want to speak against the motion that has not already spoken? Yeah. Correct. Does anyone want to speak against it? All right, Councilmember Martin.
I would be in favor of the original wording because of the number of letters that I have gotten that, despite the results of our survey, say we need more recreation centers distributed around the city. Now, I think we do need a big sports facility, and I'm glad we're doing this because I am convinced by the populace that it's important, and I believe in the social justice aspects of making this kind of high-end stuff available to everybody in the city, which it isn't today. But I also think that we need 3 rec centers distributed around the city at our current population, not just a big thing and a little thing. And we have other amenities in the city that we're behind on. So I like the idea of keeping additional bonding authority an open-ended thing. I would rather do it that way. And I'm going to at least try to vote no on this.
All right, well, that's what's great about democracy. It does take a long time, Councilmember. Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, well, I think the way that, with all due respect, that you've structured this is going to be very confusing to people. as Councilman Martin said, they're just voting for a rec center. They're not worrying about the sales tax and what's going to sunset when. And I just think it is a very poor strategy to up sales tax to pay for one particular facility when the maintenance, the ongoing maintenance of this should be paid for out of the recreation budget. If we can't afford it, we can't afford it. The feasibility study said we couldn't afford it, but we're going to put it through anyway, and then we're going to be taxing people in perpetuity to support the maintenance of a facility that, to me, and this is going to be a sales and use tax, which inordinately affects the people who can least afford to pay more taxes. So for all the reasons that I previously not supported this, I really do want this to be sunsetted because it's going to be on the ballot. We've already discussed that. I would just like to have it sunset, the tax sunset. And that I would move, well, we can't, we have to vote on yours.
Dr. Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Bagley. Actually, I didn't have all that many concerns with the original wording, but I do think it makes more sense. I think it increases the prospects for the ballot question if we word the question the way you've moved that we word it. We sunset the capital or the debt service part of this bond, and then continue the sales tax for O&M. And here would be my premise. I think the public ought to know this is what it's going to cost to maintain this facility. And that's part of the deal. And if people, we've all received just today or the last 24 hours, a fair amount of correspondence from residents, all of whom I know and for whom I have the highest regard. But the time to have had that kind of input was when months ago or weeks ago when we were putting this on the ballot. And I would say to those who might be watching this, in its purest form, this is democracy. You put this in front of the public, they get to decide. We're not deciding for the public whether or not to increase this tax. The public is. And the public's going to decide whether or not they want this amenity enough to pay for it long term in terms of maintenance and operations. And short of that, what I would not want to do is put a future council and a future city manager and a future recreation director in a position to say, now figure out how to make it work and cut whatever that $3.5 million is going to be out of something else to maintain this facility 20 years from now. I just think that's not the way we ought to approach planning.
City manager salary, and we're good to go. Councilman Martin?
Well, I'm going to change my position and vote for sunsetting everything but the O&M. Not that I agree with it, but because I think that we should have council unanimity on this, and I think the argument for doing it is valid. I do want to say that the whole tax being in perpetuity isn't really in perpetuity. You know, if in 50 years or 35 years or whatever it turned out to be, this facility became obsolete and it was torn down and replaced by something different, we would restructure the costs and we would repeal this tax and replace it with a different one. And so I think some of these arguments are false, and having done the comparison of Longmont's amenities to other cities of our size and wealth, I would have really liked the idea of providing that third rec center sometime in the future when the city was feeling flush, keeping that bonding capability. But I'm going to vote with the rest of the council.
Councilmember Peck?
Just out of curiosity, you're saying that 3.73% would pay off the principal as well as continue the O&M. So my question is, when we pay off the principal construction costs, would we still keep the 3.73 for O&M, or would we reduce that?
Mayor Bagley, members of council, it would be reduced. It would only be 0.03%. I believe that's for O&M.
Okay, thanks.
All right, nobody's left in the queue. Let's vote. I'm sure you had something really cool to say, Harold, but we're voting. If you vote yes, the motion for that's for the motion, and the motion was to change the ballot, to accept the ballot measure, but change it so that the capital costs sunset and the O&M costs continue in perpetuity, so long as the facility is in existence. All right. All right, that passes 6-1 with Councilmember Rodriguez against.
Okay, members of council, the next one is the charter revision that changes the lease timing. You may notice that in the charter, it actually restricts leases to 20 years, but also other things like franchises and streets and public places, all sorts of other things. So we have clarified in the charter revision language that this is just for property, city property.
I move that we accept the ballot measure as written. Anyone want to speak against the motion? Dr. Waters?
I think the logic for the 30 years is that it reflects what happens in terms of mortgages typically or standard. Are there any constraints of going to 40 years or more than 30 years? And is there any reason why we think that might be more attractive in terms of public-private partnerships, which is what this would be attempting to attract?
Typically, where I didn't have this constraint in a previous community, 30 years is really kind of where we settled. If you look at the public-private partnership on the Village at the Peaks, we did that in 20, but it was there, you know.
Yeah.
Really managed what you could do, but I've
So
always
you're
seen
comfortable
30.
with 30,
Yeah.
it gets it done in terms of
Correct.
what we might be trying to attract, or not what. We might be what we are trying to attract.
Correct, but I've typically seen 30 as
All right,
being a good
thanks.
number.
Councilmember Martin?
I had essentially the same comment in terms of talking to big project developers and hearing what financial models they like to use. I would have preferred seeing 40 or 50 years as preferable to 30.
All right, let's vote. A yes vote means take it as is. A yes vote means accept the ballot measure as written. Yeah. All right, that passes 6-1 with Councilmember Martin against.
Okay. And then the fourth one is the city council compensation. Changing the compensation dollars to $1,500, from $1,500 to $1,700 per month for mayor, council from $1,000 to $1,400, and adjusted annually by the methods used by Social Security. The way that this is going to have to be worded is because the charter says that you have to do this as an ordinance. This ballot issue will then require you to pass an ordinance. Is how it will be laid.
I'm going to move that, anyway, yeah, it should be. I move that we change the numbers to 2,500 and 2,000. I mean, I'm sorry. I will forego my salary increase, but if you have any hope of getting quality candidates to serve, I mean, this job, I know you do it for public service, but I mean, you'll notice that the makeup of council right now is, 5 retired people, one who owns his own business, another one who probably owns his own business, and people need to be able to serve and figure out a way. So it's been moved and seconded. Mayor Pro Tem?
I think if we raise that rate, it's pretty much guaranteed to lose. So I would like to keep it at the rate that we are having. Even though it's small, it seems to me more comprehensible to the average taxpayer. I would, however, like to add a sentence or a phrase at the beginning of it, because otherwise people have no comprehension of why we're doing this. It looks like we're just greedy for that extra $400. I would like it to say, because city council pay has not been increased for 20 years, while workload and city population has nearly doubled, comma, beginning in January 2020. I would move.
All right, hold on, there's a
that.
motion on the table.
Oh, all right.
And then let's go ahead and vote on that. Does anyone, in addition to Mayor Pro Tem, does anyone want to speak against the motion? All right, let's go ahead and vote. All right, the motion fails with Councilmember Rodriguez, Mayor Bagley, and Councilmember Martin for, and the other 4 people against. All right, I move that we actually add the language offered by Mayor Pro Tem. You should have seconded that. Okay, but does anyone want to speak against the motion? All right, let's vote. That passes 6-1 with Dr. Waters against.
Okay, thank you very much. Members of council will be bringing back the ordinances and resolutions on August 13th. Those resolutions, only one time, but the ordinances will come twice, the 13th and the 27th. I am assuming you'd like to prepare resolutions of support for these ballot issues?
Yeah.
Okay.
You assumed correctly. Mayor Pro Tem, are you in the queue?
So
You can do whatever you
the
want.
ordinance for the compensation increase would come back in August?
Yes, that'll come
Okay.
back as a resolution
All right.
on August 13th.
Okay.
All right, time for Mayor and Council comments. Mayor Pro Tem.
First of all, we have our lovely annual fair. As a precursor to this, Councilwoman Peck and I, and maybe some other council members, went to a cow cuddling and ice cream pass out from the
Did you say cow cuddling?
cow cuddling. Although there wasn't so much cuddling as just patting and whispering in its ear.
No, you saying you cuddled a cow.
Yes, in the back of the Chamber of Commerce, and I was very happy to see that they did this outside, because initially I thought, well, these guys are not really farmers, and if they try to have a cow in the city, the Chamber of Commerce, that's not going to be a good outcome. But they did have the cow, a very sweet young mother, outside, and we all patted her and talked to her. Anyway, that was very pleasant. I also want to remind people that this is the county fair. County fair is coming up. Come to the county fair. There's it opens on this Friday. The Times Call had a great little handout booklet in it, and you can also look this up at the Times Call and elsewhere on all the events from for the Boulder County Fair. And there's a parade on Saturdays starting, I don't know, we're lining up at around 9 o'clock, so it's always wonderful, especially to see the horses, to me. So come to the fair.
All right, Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I would like to offer an apology on behalf of the council to the people of Longmont. I think while we were discussing the affordable housing, density, height bonuses, things like that, parking restrictions, we, all of us, or most of us, were guilty of using the phrase NIMBY as shorthand for people who are objecting to changes in the community. And we shouldn't have done that. It can be frustrating for the council to try to walk the fine line between keeping people who like the way things are happy and doing what we believe needs to be done to help people who are not doing well in the way things are. But I think we need to be respectful, equally respectful of all of the opinions of all the people who are in our community and who believe that they are advocating for the right thing for their community. So I'm sorry, people, we shouldn't have called you NIMBYs, and I know at least 3 people used
I
the
use
word
NIMBYs, and I'm not sorry.
Okay, well, I did and I am sorry.
That's good.
And so if nobody else wants to be apologized on behalf of, I apologize on behalf of myself. But I think we shouldn't say that. So I'm sorry.
All right. I was just teasing. You can apologize for me whenever you want. I usually make mistakes. All right. Yeah, I know. I appreciate that. I just walk around. I should just get a T-shirt that just says, I know. I'm sorry. Right, Dr. Waters.
Yeah, and just on the, following that up, and I'm going to make another comment as well, but I wouldn't, the term NIMBY is a term of derision, and in that I was one of those and shouldn't have used the term. I will say this, that I know among the 7 members of this council, and I certainly know it's true among the staff, understand the tensions that we're all grappling with right now between those who are homeless or housing insecure, those who are frustrated by the growing phenomena of homelessness, the pressure we hear from some to create more housing affordability, right, more units, and the push to stop growing. And sometimes from all the same people. I mean, and at some point we have to have a really serious public conversation about you can't have it all those ways. We cannot reduce homelessness in this community and reduce housing insecurity without building more homes. And we can't build more homes without more development. And we're not going to have less congestion with more development. I mean, it's just a reality. Now, we have to be smart about how we create ways for people to get around, right? The whole idea of build wider streets, you get more cars. Build more bike paths, or more public transportation. But there's a real tension, and we can feel it, and we hear it every week. And I think we need to be really explicit. If we want to reduce housing insecurity, we've been on these Friday morning conversations. I made a comment in the last Friday morning conversation that when we opened Fall River, we purged the waiting list, meaning we reduced names off a waiting list for the Longmont Housing Authority of seniors who were in a queue waiting to have a chance to apply for a subsidized apartment. The purge of that list took the number down to like 504, and as soon as it was reopened, it went back up to more than 1,500. We have 1,500 seniors in this community who qualify and are waiting to have a chance to be in a subsidized apartment, and we're about to have 50 more units come online. Now, when that county project gets going, right, at the 515 Coffin, there'll be 60 more. But the point is that the needs are growing far more rapidly than the units that are coming online. And we cannot house our veterans, our seniors, our families, our victims of domestic abuse without having more housing options. And we can't do that without growth. And I just think we kind of have to come to grips with it. So I don't want to use a term, I don't want to be insensitive or impolite or disrespectful to folks, but we got to call that question. And there are going to be neighborhoods that are going to be uncomfortable. I don't know how to make them comfortable, but they're also uncomfortable with homelessness and the effects. So that's not what I was going to say. What I was going to ask is, does anybody, in our information packet, we had the second quarter report from LADP. It's not yet 11 o'clock. Anybody want to dig into that report? No. I didn't think so. But I would. But I don't want to do it by following up individually. Could we invite?
They're coming for a presentation because of timing on some of the conversations. We wanted you all to get it, and then she will come and make a presentation.
So we'll get a chance to
Yes.
dig into that report.
Yep.
Thank you.
Dr. Waters, that was the most eloquent argument against NIMBYism I've ever heard. Fantastic. Well done. I'm just kidding. Come on, guys. Chuckle. It's okay. We're going to get out of here early tonight. Inside Councilmember Peck, she's just laughing. All right. The only thing, nobody else is in the queue. The only thing I was going to say is Mayor Pro Tem, I wish you luck. I'm going to be out of town Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Again, yes. And so good luck with my fellow council members. And Councilmember Harold, anything?
No comments, Mayor, Council.
Sorry, Councilmember Harold. Yes. Yeah. Eugene, anything?
No comments, Mayor.
All right. Anybody want to say anything clever or funny before I bang the gavel? All right, we're adjourned.